way that we can. So we have to have that law at EU level. This week we also voted on a law on consumers related to energy use. I mean, many of you may have seen again in the newspaper the headlines saying that energy bills are soaring, that everybody's paying more. The price of oil has gone up so high, that's feeding through onto people's charges in terms of gas and electricity. And that isn't just a UK phenomenon, that's happening everywhere. In places like France, they've had a 14% hike in prices, and particularly for households that are on poor incomes, the issue is how do you better manage your energy use. So what we have done is we've asked for a charter of rights for people who buy energy from any energy company. And again, you may know that in the UK we have...
Very interesting discussion, please. Who's brave enough to go first? Thanks, Sam.
Shall I take a couple of questions? Is that easier, or are you not getting any questions?
No, they should all be interested in asking a question too.
I don't mind taking them on.
Do you think Turkey should join the EU?
Sorry?
Do you think Turkey should join the EU?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm going to give you an honest answer. On the euro, well, we've already had that discussion, if you remember some years ago, that we had the debate around whether we should join the euro or not. And I think, personally, although I can see the benefits of being a member of the eurozone, and actually the more that the pound starts to decline against the eurozone, the more it probably makes sense for us to join it. Whatever becomes a strong currency is a currency we should be we should be a member of. But at that time, the pound was very strong. We had a very buoyant financial services sector in the City of London, and actually now we've got quite a good financial services sector now growing in both Leeds and in Manchester and the regions. And so the decision was taken to apply tests to whether we should join. And one of those tests was what impact would it have on our premier place in the world, not in Europe, but in the world, as a global financial centre. What difference would it make generally to our standard of living? And the decision was taken that, not that we would say no ever to the euro, but that it was not in our interest to join the euro at that particular point in time. So, and I think that was the right decision to take on economic grounds. But as I said, however, as we now move towards looking at the fact that the eurozone is much stronger actually than the dollar, for example, the euro against the dollar actually is very strong at the moment. The dollar as an international currency is very weak. Then I think we have to keep returning to that, because the reality is that if the euro becomes the currency and the world currency, it overtakes the pound and it becomes stronger. Again, if it's in our economic interest to join it, we should consider it. We should seriously consider whether we do join. But I think the decision at the time it was taken was the right decision to take. And as you know, Gordon Brown took it as a chancellor decision, saying we shouldn't take that decision for a political reason. We shouldn't take the decision to say, because we're a member of the European Union, we should be a member of the euro. We should take it on economic grounds. And if it was in the economic interest to do it, and it wasn't, so we didn't. But we probably will review it in terms of whether there is any advantage in the longer term. But my view is really that it has to be in our interest. And that's the way that certainly my delegation views our membership of the European Union, particularly for our region in the Northwest. We're looking all the time at what benefits do we get for it. Is it in our interest? We look at the amount of European funding we've secured here in the region. European Capital of Culture in Liverpool. We lobby very hard to be the capital of culture for Europe. We lobby hard for all the funding you see that's making all the regeneration changes in St Helens and right across Merseyside. So we're there in a very pragmatic, practical approach to say what benefits does it give to us, and that's what we will vote for and support. The other question was Turkey. I think in all the debates that you've heard around the issue of the Irish referendum and the Irish people saying no to this particular treaty, the new treaty of Lisbon, what that does of course mean is that it puts a question mark over whether Turkey and Croatia will join. Because one of the reasons that many of those reforms and changes had to be made is that if you keep growing the EU, so it's grown from originally 12 to now 27, that you cannot not make changes, if you like, to the machinery of how it works. And of course, some of those changes were to prepare for down the line future enlargements, because at the moment we've got 27 member states, we've got 27 commissioners. Well, we can't have 27 different commissioners, we can't have 29 if 2 more join. We can't keep growing commissioners, because my view certainly is that I don't want a European Commission that is a massive bureaucracy. So we have to keep that small and tight, and we don't keep adding new members to it. And of course, one of the reasons the Irish voted no was that it was quite clear that a small member state like Ireland, because it is a small member state, it's about a population of 4.5 million, would lose their commissioner. Currently they have an Irish commissioner, but under these changes they would lose their commissioner, and they weren't very happy about that because they felt maybe they lose influence in the European Union. So these changes were being made, as I said, for enlargement to make things work better. And in the case of Britain, that didn't have an impact on us because we're a big member state, so we would keep our commissioner. And actually, in terms of the voting in the Council of Ministers, we actually slightly increased our power. We'd have more voting rights. And again, for Ireland, they'd have less. So they really weren't very happy about what they saw as a weakening of their influence as a small member state. And there were many other issues in the referendum that had nothing to do with Europe, as you know. But that's the way sometimes referendums work. And they're not always about the issue that people put on the table. Campaigners campaign on issues that are not directly related to the treaty that people were voting on. On Turkey or Bulgaria, Turkey or Croatia, there's a big debate about whether you decide to let a member state in a situation where you still have concerns. So in the case of Turkey, and in the case of some of the members like Romania or Bulgaria, the most recent members, what we're saying to them all along the line, and that's what we do in our committees, we do that in our Human Rights Committee, is that we do say to them, when you join, you have to sign up to what we call the European Union acquis. And that acquis means also that you have to respect the rights and the democratic values and standards that we have. And in the case of places like Turkey, we've had concerns about that. We've always had concerns that human rights are not being treated with the same kind of level of respect that they are in other EU countries. We have to make sure that they have a proper functioning justice system, that they have a proper functioning police system, etc. There are issues about the Kurdish problem and how the Turkish authorities are dealing with that. But on the other hand, the other side of that debate is that if you work with these member states and say to them you can become a family of democratic EU member states, that you actually push them to reforms in that direction. And in the case of Bulgaria, I have had a lot of issues around Bulgaria because you may have seen that I have been campaigning for Michael Shields, a Liverpool football fan who was arrested in Bulgaria. And certainly working with his legal team, we believe falsely arrested, and we do believe that the person who did it is still at large and having a good life in Warrington, actually. And from that perspective, what I am concerned about is that I think Bulgaria has still got many weaknesses in its police system. They haven't cleared up by police corruption. They have a judicial system that still has many weaknesses and flaws. And so, if you asked me, would I say were they ready to come in? I probably would have said that I don't think, that's my personal view because of the experience that I've had, I probably would say I don't think that they were quite right for membership joining. But the other people will say to me, but we bring them in, and then, as is happening currently, there's just a team of monitors have just gone to Bulgaria to check on all the outstanding issues we've got. And they will write a report, and in that report, all of the continuing issues they've got, weaknesses, they will be told they have these weaknesses, and they will be told basically that there will be sanctions unless they fix them. So you can look at it from both perspectives. You can decide, do we leave them outside and say another 10, 20 years, and then you can come in, or do you bring them in and say, okay, but now we're going to force you in a very rapid pace to adopt democratic values and standards, and that's probably better for the people in those countries. I mean, if you were to ask, for example, the Romani gypsies in Hungary, is their life better since they joined the EU? Their life has got to be better because they're not allowed to discriminate against them anymore, because we have very strong anti-discrimination laws that everybody shares the same approach to across the EU. So, I think people will have different personal views, but I think enlargement probably is the way to go, because we avoid